Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick.
Amine.
Today we're talking about the updated Rolling Stone Top 500 Albums of All Time list. There's a bunch of links down below. Make sure you check them out. There's links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that we put together every week, and the Patreon page. Make sure you check all that out. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you see a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time we release new episodes. So back in December of last year, Rolling Stone updated their top 500 albums of all time, and they've done this list multiple times. I think the first one they did was like 2003, I think. I think they updated it in like 2012. They did another one in 2020, and then they updated this one last year. And like every time they've done some small tweaks to it, I thought we'd kind of roll through some of the albums that they've got on their list, because I will say that I will agree with a lot of the albums on here. I don't necessarily agree with their placement, though.
Yeah, that's the
Some of them
issue.
they've got way too high on this. So we'll kind of scroll through some of the first ones. But I think we did an episode on it when the list came out in 2020, and I feel like I didn't compare the two lists, but I feel like the list this year is a little different than the list from what, almost 4 years ago. I guess I should add that this list was put together. I think they said they had over 300 like artists and producers and industry type people, which whatever that means. I'm sure it's probably paid advertisers they allowed to vote on some of this, because like I said, there's some very questionable albums on this list, but I can't argue with the first one. The first one is Marvin Gaye, "What's Going On," which
It's a great album. I don't know where it...
See, that's the thing when it comes to lists like this. Yeah. Music is so subjective.
Right.
That's the one thing we always talk about. Is you can take a group of 100 people and put them in a room. All 100 of them will come up with vastly different lists. But I love this album. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. Would I put it at number one? Probably not. But I think I'd have it definitely in my top five. The album they've got at number two, I know Ian hates, and that is "Pet Sounds" by the Beach Boys.
I don't hate it. It's just not that. It's just not great in my opinion, and doesn't belong on a greatest albums of all time list. I mean, it wasn't even considered a great album when it came out. It took time for it to become a great album, at least in the public sphere. It was. Panned.
I don't know if it took time.
It was kind of panned when it came out.
I don't know. It's an album I do love. I don't think I wouldn't have it at number two. I would definitely have it, I think, in the top 25 though. That's kind of where I said, I think that's kind of where it's interesting to go over this list with you, because we have very different musical interests and musical tastes. So the album they've got at number three is Joni Mitchell Blue, which, once again, it's a good album. I don't know if I'd have it at that spot. No. Songs in the Key of Life by Stevie Wonder, I would actually have above Blue.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that one I could see being in a top 5 or top 10 for sure.
But then again, I don't know. I'd have to go back through them. I'm not even sure if it's Stevie's best album. I don't know. It's probably maybe his most successful album. Maybe that's why it's up so high. But it is a good album. And then number five is the Beatles' Abbey Road, which...
I love the Beatles, but I don't know if I'd put them in a greatest of all time. I don't think I'd put Abbey Road in the top 5.
I don't know, because I go back and forth between what's a better album. Is it Abbey Road or is it Let It Be? That's kind of the decision I kind of throw up. And I know Let It Be is pretty high on this list also.
Yeah, I mean, I like Let It Be better personally, but Abbey Road's a much more cohesive album.
The one they've got at number 6 is one that I was kind of surprised by. And that's Nevermind by Nirvana. And yes, it's a hugely influential album. It really changed music, or helped change music in the popular sphere in the early part of the 90s. But is it really the 6th best album of all time?
That's what I mean. It's like, I don't know. No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I love the album. It's probably one of my top 25 albums of all time, but I don't know. I don't know if I'd make it number 6.
Yeah. And number 7 is an album that I would probably put at number 1 for maybe the most overplayed album of all time.
Fair enough, yeah.
And an album that, we as vinyl collectors, it's one that most of us have. And one that, for the 17th millionth time is getting reissued for Record Store Day. And that is Rumors by Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah. Which, again, is a good album. And it was, for the band, it was a huge turning point. But it's, I don't know.
And number 8 is an album that I would have much higher. I would probably have this in the top 5.
Purple Rain.
And that's Purple Rain by Prince. It was like I remember when it came out. Like I was young. I was what, like 5 or 6 years old when that album came out, and it was like everywhere. Like you couldn't get away from that music. You couldn't get away from the movie. Yeah. It's a great movie. It's a great album. Like I said, I definitely have it in at least in my top 5.
Yeah, maybe for me top 10 because I don't know if it's even Prince's best album, but it's great. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking the album in any way because it is. It's a fantastic album, but I think he made other albums that were better.
Yeah. So the album that they've got at number 9, I might get some pushback on this one, I think is a vastly overrated album. And that is Blood on the Tracks by Bob Dylan. I understand it's a good album. I'm not saying it's a horrible album. I just don't think it's one of Bob's. I wouldn't even think it's. I don't know if I'd put it in the top 5 as far as Bob Dylan albums go. I don't know. It's just a hard pick.
The thing with Bob Dylan is like when I'm hearing his songs, I love them. But when I'm not hearing his songs, I don't really even give him any thought. Like there's no part of me that goes, oh, I think I want to listen to Bob Dylan today. But when he's on, it's like, oh yeah, that's great. That's kind of how I feel about all of his music, to be honest.
I don't know. He had some really classic albums in the 60s.
Some of his songs are great when they're done by other artists.
Well, Blonde on Blonde is is a better album than Blood on the Tracks. So I mean, I don't know. I just wouldn't have that one that high. And then the album that they got at number 10. It's a good album. I don't know if I'd have it in the top 50 though.
Right.
And that's Lauryn Hill, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Like I said, good album, but is it really the 10th best album of all time? I don't know. It's just a hard pick for me. I guess some of the surprising picks for me is I think the last time they did this list, I think this one was much higher, I think.
It might have been.
And that's Thriller by Michael Jackson. They got it at number 12. I don't know. It's definitely a top 10 album for me.
Well, I mean, just in sheer, pop culture influence and record sales and quality, because it is a great album. I mean, how many number one singles did that album have?
Basically the entire
whole album. Yeah. There's no denying that it probably arguably should be number one.
It definitely
based on all the. I mean, not necessarily my number one in favorite albums, but if you just look at everything combined, it probably should be the number one album.
As far as quality goes, yeah. It definitely should be a lot higher than 12. The album that they got at number 14, I 100% disagree with, and that is Exile on Main Street by the Rolling Stones. Rolling Stones had way better albums than Exile. I could probably pick. I think Goat's Head Soup is a much better album. I think Let It Bleed is a much better album. I guess what draws people to Exile is Exile doesn't have any of those huge hits, but
so it's cool because it's not cool.
Maybe kind of a thing? I guess is the thing I've always looked at. I don't know. As far as 60s and 70s albums from the Rolling Stones go, it's probably mid-tier pick for me. But I don't know. That's just my opinion. And just kind of scrolling through. Number 15, they got Public Enemy, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. As far as influence goes, easily one of the most influential rap albums of all time. I think this and Chronic are probably the Chronic are probably the two up there for at least for me. So I understand that being 15, maybe a little bit higher. I probably would have put that one. But there's some other question marks on here. So number 17, they've got Kanye West, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, an album I absolutely love. No way is this the 17th best album of all time. I know. I'll get no disagreement out of you on that one.
No.
Number 18, they've got Bob Dylan, Highway 61 Revisited. Easily, I think, a far superior album than Blood on the Tracks. So that's why I said it. I think that they've got those Bob Dylan albums maybe a little mixed up because Highway 61 Revisited is an album I absolutely love. And I think when we did our episode where we talked about overrated albums, and I talked about Blonde on Blonde, I brought up Highway 61 because it is an incredible album. And then number 20. I get it that this is a popular band and people like their music. I just don't think it's a great album, and that's Kid A by Radiohead.
See, I would argue it's almost better than OK Computer.
I think OK Computer is kind of an overrated album.
I know. But I'm just saying in terms of people always bring up OK Computer, whereas I'm well, maybe Kid A. Maybe talk about Kid A because it's.
I think Pablo Honey and the Bends are their two best albums. Yeah. I know I have people that have come up to me in person and give me shit for saying that. But, just my opinion. Kid A is it's a good album. It's just not the 20th best album of all time, I think.
No, I agree with that.
And then come on. At number 23, they've got The Velvet Underground and Nico. it's not a good album. I'm sorry.
I mean, it's a listenable album. It's fun to listen to, but I don't think it's a top
the
tier.
23rd best album of all time.
I don't think it's a top tier.
I mean,
album.
I don't know if I would put that in the top 500 really.
Yeah. And it's been nice knowing all of the viewers out there who probably hate us for saying that. I don't know.
And then skipping back to number 30 is an album that I think it's a crime to have this album rated so low. I don't know if you'll agree with this, but Jimi Hendrix, Are You Experienced, in my opinion, should be one of the top 15 albums of all time. I mean, it was a game-changing album for rock music. It's, even 50 plus years later, still a hugely influential album. Probably more influential than a lot of the albums that they've got listed before it. But, like I said, I just can't believe that they've got it. Like, who is picking this album at number 30?
Right. No, I probably agree with you. I was sitting here thinking, I'm like, if I were to try and put together, say, a top 25 list, my top 25 would probably have 75 albums in it. Because, it's very difficult to pick and choose albums like this. However, if you look at the overall scheme of the music industry and where it's gone and where it's been and where it started, yeah, Jimi Hendrix is up there, man. I think that album for sure should be probably higher than 30?
Yeah, 30th. Yeah.
30th.
And then I guess I'll leave it on this, or unless I find anything else like super egregious in here. But the album they've got at number 37 is kind of the same way in my mind. How can you have this album at 37 when you've got a D'Angelo album listed higher? When you've got a Wu-Tang Clan album listed higher?
I don't even know who D'Angelo is.
Well, it's not your style of music. But anyway, number 37, they've got The Chronic by Dr. Dre, which, is easily a top 20 album. Just, it's like the rap version of Thriller, really, where there were so many big hits off this album. It changed music. I'm pretty sure it's one of the highest selling rap albums of the 90s. It's just an incredible album. And you got it at number 37. It just, especially when you've got other albums that were influenced by this album that are higher on the list. It's just kind of strange to me.
Yeah.
And I guess the last one I'll complain about is the one they've got at number 55, which, again, to me, I think is one of the top 5 albums of all time. I think it's probably the best album of all time. And that's, I know you're going to disagree with this one, is The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. I don't know. I guess kind of looking back, it was 50 years since it's been released. Maybe it's kind of lost some of the magic to a lot of the people that look at the album or listen to it.
Well, they've all moved on, too. The audience has died. I don't want to say the word, but a lot of that audience is,
they've moved on to a different life.
Yes, they've been loosed the mortal coil.
Yeah. I don't know. It's still a great album. I would definitely have a lot higher than 55.
Yeah, just in terms of if you look at popularity and record sales and maybe influence, sure. I don't agree that I wouldn't put it in the top 100. But that being said, there's albums that are higher ranked that I would not put above that just based on those details. Yeah. So,
well, that's all we get for today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop us a comment down below. Love to know what you guys think of this new updated Rolling Stone top 500 albums of all time. Largely, I think it's kind of garbage, but love to know what you guys think. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give us the old thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all we got. Until next time.
Talk to y'all later.
Keep on spinning.